For more on this, we're joined live by investigative journalist Webster Tarpley, who joins us from Washington, D.C. So all eyes are now on Pakistan, where Osama bin Laden was killed, and reporters are suggesting that the government was sheltering the terrorist leader for years. But how is this possible if the country is indeed one of the major victims of terrorism? I mean, do you think that's really believable?
Let me say, first of all, what I have to say about bin Laden is based on a 500-page, rather exhaustive book that I've written, 9/11 Synthetic, Made in USA. I think this is a completely manufactured, invented story created out of whole cloth by the U.S. intelligence community, primarily for the purpose of targeting Pakistan. And there's been a build-up to it. We had a very harsh statement condemning Pakistan in one of the terror reports of the U.S. government. We had Admiral Mullen visiting Pakistan, accusing them of being accomplices of the terrorist Haqqani network. We then had the CIA limited hangout operation known as WikiLeaks targeting Pakistan. The Washington Post putting that on the front page. The center of gravity of al-Qaeda was always Pakistan. And now we have this manufactured story. Abbottabad, allegedly the hiding place, the lair of bin Laden for the past 6 years. It's totally fantastic, but the purpose is clear enough. They're targeting Pakistan for more attacks. The Chinese government has understood this immediately. We have a very strong statement from China this morning, basically saying to the U.S., if you mess with Islamabad, you will be messing with Beijing, and this will get into something much bigger than you thought. The main danger right now is false flag terror events, in reality organized by the U.S. or by NATO intelligence, that will be blamed on Pakistan. And indeed, we have this from several CIA people in the media here saying there will be revenge terror attacks, but they'll be coming from the Inter-Services Intelligence Network. That is the much demonized ISI of Pakistan. And you can see this is a complete setup. So people need to be vigilant in that regard.
The U.S. says it has photos of slain bin Laden. ABC News is reporting right now that they may in fact release them today. But why don't you think they release them right away, get all the skepticism over with over the death of bin Laden?
I can't speculate about that, but I'm sure that whatever they release will essentially be a fraud. The real bin Laden has been dead for a long time. And for the last 6, 7, 8 years, you've been hearing primarily audio statements from a kind of production company located probably in Pakistan.
Many agree that the U.S. foreign policy prompted the attack of, prompted the dawn of al-Qaeda back in the 80s. That's no secret. Now it's supporting rebels in Libya who allegedly have links with extremism. How long do you think the U.S. may continue a pattern of arming extremists or possible extremists who later there's blowback from?
Well, this is the tremendous contradiction, is that the United States is openly supporting al-Qaeda forces, which represent a large part of the Benghazi Rebel Council in Libya. In Libya or in Yemen, al-Qaeda is it's one of the main tools of the U.S. in destabilizing the government. One suspects that in Syria and in Algeria that's also the case. But then, in sharp contradiction, if you're al-Qaeda in Afghanistan or Pakistan, then you have to be bombed. And this is an unsustainable contradiction. It just makes absolutely no sense. I think what we're actually seeing is the decline of the U.S. empire. If you look back at the fall of the Spanish, the French, the British empires, in those cases, the fall of the empire has been accompanied by world wars. Now, if the United States decides to go after Pakistan, trying to split Pakistan into Sindh, Baluchistan, Punjab, Pashtunistan, you're going to get a collision between the United States and China. And at that point, Russia will also have to respond in some way. What you're seeing is how the decline of empire can lead to war by miscalculation. The U.S. ruling elite is in a frenzy because they are trying to stop Saudi Arabia and Pakistan from leaving the empire, from making a jailbreak, from bolting out from under U.S. hegemony. So that is why they've chosen to liquidate hundreds of billions of dollars they've invested in the mythological figure of bin Laden. They wouldn't be doing that if it weren't something big. It goes far beyond Obama's fortunes at the polls. It's an attempt to try to save the U.S. position in the world. I think it's very unlikely to succeed.
Webb, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're going to have to end it there. Investigative journalist Webster Tarpley.
Let me bring in Webster Tarpley. Webster Tarpley, what about the timing of this announcement, that it has come at this point? Some of the things that Gibran talked about is valid to bring up. How can we really be sure that he was killed then and not before? I mean, there are no remains or even pictures of his death. We could mention the interview that Benazir Bhutto had, which we ran in our report, that stated that bin Laden was actually killed by Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, one of those convicted of kidnapping and killing U.S. journalist Daniel Pearl.
As you point out, there are no pictures. When the U.S. claimed to have captured Saddam Hussein, they had pictures. They had pictures of him dead. He was shot in the face, a mafia technique, we're told. Buried at sea. DNA very, very quick. No proof, no substantiation. This is the story of bin Laden for the past 10 years. Everything attributed to him is essentially an unsubstantiated assertion by the U.S. government. His role in 9/11, never proven. Al-Qaeda in 9/11, never proven. Asserted and repeated a million times, but never proven. I think the most realistic hypothesis is the biological individual known as bin Laden has been dead for a long time. And what we've been seeing over the past 10 years, pretty much, is a series of doubles, a series of people maneuvered by the U.S. intelligence. We've seen a fat bin Laden, a thin bin Laden. We've seen bin Laden the stout, bin Laden the gaunt. We've seen bin Laden angry, bin Laden scholarly, bin Laden of all types. And now he has been liquidated. Now, if he's been liquidated after the investment of hundreds of billions of dollars to make this person an ego ideal and hero figure for the Arab and to some extent the Islamic world, why is that being done? I think it's extremely ominous. It indicates a flight forward by U.S. imperialism. I think that the very ominous part of this is war between the United States and Pakistan. Already last week, we had the Washington Post and other papers conveniently helped along by WikiLeaks, that CIA limited hangout operation, telling us that at 9/11, the center of gravity of Al-Qaeda was in Karachi, Pakistan. That was the headline of the Washington Post a week ago today. Now we have bin Laden. The fact that he's caught allegedly, again, the story is that he's found in Abbottabad. It's like a military reservation. It's like saying he was found at West Point, New York, or Annapolis, Maryland, or the near the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. The implication is that bin Laden was being shielded and protected by the Pakistani military and the Pakistani ISI. And given the way things are going, that makes them a target. The reason for this, of course, has nothing to do with any fantastic stories about the war on terror. It's simply the idea that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have attempted to form an alliance to get off the U.S. plantation, out of the U.S. empire. And precisely at the moment that Prince Bandar had gone to Pakistan to set this up, we find that the attacks on Pakistan have intensified.
Webster Tarpley, please, if you can, we have to look at the consequences of this announcement, and of course why it was announced now, and the significance of it. And one of it is that it may increase the chance of a revenge attack. So, do you think that is it a stretch to say that the U.S. is setting up the grounds for any type of military incursion or adventurism? I mean, we can look at the situation in Yemen with the presence of AQAP in the south. But tell us what you think, whether this is a scenario of something to come by U.S.
I'm afraid right now the door to a false flag terror operation staged by the U.S., British, or NATO intelligence community, this door is now wide open. It will simply be attributed to Al-Qaeda, so-called. It will be a revenge attack, but at the same time it will be explained as promoted by Pakistan or some other country that the U.S. wishes to target. And people should realize this is the dynamic of false flags. What we're seeing now is why, when the Spanish Empire collapsed, you had virtually a world war. The French Empire, the British Empire, all of these collapses of empires led to world wars. And we're now in the collapse phase of the U.S. empire, as was discussed in Aspen, Colorado last summer. We are now in very acute danger of general war. since we have Saudi Arabia and Pakistan joining together to get out of the U.S. empire, with Russia and China backing them up. An attack on Pakistan could easily lead to a collision between the United States and China, and perhaps also a collision between the United States and Russia, with the Russians also being very displeased by what the U.S. is doing in Libya. So this is all going on. The other thing I would certainly stress is that this now leaves the Al-Qaeda, so-called, this gaggle of patsies and psychotics and fanatics. The leader, I guess, of that right now is Anwar al-Awlaki, known in the trade as al-Awlaki, the CIA lackey. In other words, a fairly obvious double agent. The irony right now is that the U.S. is allied with Al-Qaeda, most obviously in Libya, in the city of Darna, but also in Yemen, whereas in the Pakistan-Afghanistan area, Al-Qaeda is still viewed as a target to be bombed and strafed.